We were on the kitchen floor at 1 in the morning. The way we ended up most nights, neither of us could sleep. When Ren asked, "So do you actually like anyone? Like, right now?" I should have lied. 3 years of living with her had taught me exactly how to keep things light, and the easy answer was sitting right there for the taking. Instead, I heard myself say, "Yeah, someone I shouldn't, someone who's around all the time. Someone who'd probably move out if she knew." And then I watched my best friend, my roommate of 3 years, the person who narrated through every movie and had never once in her life run out of things to say, go completely, totally quiet. She didn't ask who. She just looked at the 6 inches of floor between our knees for a long time, and the silence got so loud I could hear the refrigerator. I'll tell you what I'd just done. But first you have to understand how careful 2 people can be for 3 years, and how one stupid honest sentence at 1 a.m. can take all of it down. My name is Owen Park. I'm 34, and I bake bread for a living, which means I'm up at 4 in the morning with my hands in dough while the rest of the city sleeps. Bread is mostly waiting. You learn that fast or you quit. You can't rush a proof. You can't force a rise. You can't make heat do its work faster by wanting it more. The loaf is done when it's done, and the only thing impatience ever gets you is something flat. I'd learned all of that about flour by 25. It took me a great deal longer to notice I had never once applied it to a person. Ren Delgado and I became roommates by accident. We'd both answered the same ad for the same room in the same 2-bedroom, shown up at the same time, and liked the place so much that when the landlord said he couldn't choose between us, we looked at each other and just decided to split it. 2 strangers who'd rather live with an unknown than lose the apartment. That was 3 years ago. We'd been a unit ever since. She talked the way other people breathe. She narrated films, argued with the radio, gave running commentary to the plants. She wore mismatched socks on purpose and got genuinely offended on behalf of fictional underdogs in stories that hadn't happened yet. And every day, after I came home from the bakery around noon, I'd leave a loaf on the counter, one of the ugly ones, the misshapen rejects the shop couldn't sell, wrapped in the same worn blue dish towel, still a little warm, because Ren did not believe in mornings, but she believed wholeheartedly in bread. 3 years of ugly loaves. It was the most reliable sentence I knew how to say without words. Here's the lie I'd like to mark early. I told myself the bread was just being a good roommate. I told myself the 1 a.m. floor talks, the inside language, the way the apartment felt wrong when she was gone for a weekend. All of it was friendship, the good kind, the kind you protect by never, ever risking it. I'd been in love with Ren for most of 3 years, and I'd built an entire architecture of carefulness around it. Every beam of it engineered so I'd never have to find out what would happen if I said so. Bread had taught me you can't rush the rise. I'd quietly decided that meant never, which is not patience. It's just fear with better branding. It happened on a Tuesday, the night nothing is supposed to happen. She'd been out on a date, her 3rd with a man named Devin, who was, by her own running commentary, fine, the way a beige wall is fine, and she'd come home early, kicked her shoes off by the door, and found me where I usually was at that hour, on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinets, eating cereal. Because the baker's schedule had long since detached me from normal mealtimes. She slid down the cabinets next to me without being asked. The fridge hummed. The one bulb over the stove we kept meaning to replace buzzed faintly. The apartment smelled like the rosemary loaf I'd brought home and the rain she'd walked in through. We talked the way we always did, about nothing, about Devin the beige wall, about whether it was sad to be relieved a date had ended early. And then she pulled her knees up, rested her chin on them, and asked it, light as anything. "So do you actually like anyone? Like right now?" 3 years of careful, light-hearted deflection sat right there for the taking, and I didn't take it. Maybe it was the hour, the way 1 a.m. makes honesty feel free of charge. I said, "Yeah," I felt her turn her head. "Someone I shouldn't. Someone who's around all the time. Someone who'd probably move out if she knew." I kept my eyes on the cereal bowl like a coward studying scripture. And Wren went quiet. Not a normal quiet. Wren had never been quiet in 3 years. Quiet was the one note she didn't have. But she went still, and her mouth opened slightly like a sentence had been cued and then deleted, and she looked at the 6 inches of floor between our knees for what felt like a full minute, and the refrigerator was suddenly the loudest thing I had ever heard. I had handed her a sentence with a trapdoor in it, someone who's around all the time, who'd move out if she knew. And I watched her stand on the trapdoor and feel it give, and say nothing at all. "Anyway," I said, because somebody had to put out the fire I'd started. "It's late." "Yeah," she said. Just that. She got up, said goodnight to the room more than to me, and went to her room, and the door clicked, and I sat on the floor holding a bowl of softening cereal, understanding that I had just, very calmly, set fire to the only home I had. The next morning I left for the bakery in the dark, like always. And when I came home at noon, I stood in the kitchen for a long time with an ugly loaf in my hands and the blue towel folded on the counter, not sure, for the first time in 3 years, whether I was still allowed to leave it. I left it. Her door stayed shut. I didn't know whether the silence in the apartment was hers or mine, or the particular kind 2 people make together when something true has finally been said and neither of them knows what to do with it. For 3 days we became polite strangers who happened to share a lease. We Good Morning Ed. We discussed the dishwasher. Wren, who had narrated every film we'd ever watched, sat through an entire movie beside me without a single word. And the quiet was so foreign that I kept glancing over to check she was still breathing. The apartment itself felt wrong, the way a kitchen feels wrong when the oven's been off for hours, colder than the thermostat says, the life gone out of the air. We'd had 100 small rituals I'd never bothered to name until they stopped. The way she'd read me headlines from the couch while I cooked. The way I'd leave my hand palm up on the table for her to drop her keys into when hers were full. The way the last one awake turned off the hall light and said, "Every night for 3 years. Night. Weirdo." Nobody said night. Weirdo. The hall light stayed on, or it didn't. And either way, the silence about it was its own small grief. I told myself her silence had been an answer. The clearest answer there is, really, you ask a man if he likes someone. He all but tells you it's you. And you say yeah and go to bed and stop speaking. I'd misread 3 years. I'd mistaken the easy closeness of a good roommate for something with weight in it, set that weight down on a friendship never built to hold it. And now there was a crack running clean through the thing, and the crack was mine. A baker should know better. You don't open the oven door in the first 10 minutes to check the rise. You let in the cold air and the whole loaf collapses. And then you stand there, having ruined something perfectly good because you needed to know too soon. I'd opened the door. I told myself the silence was the collapse. But the evidence didn't behave the way a rejection should. The loaf kept disappearing. Every noon I left the ugly bread on the counter in the blue towel, and every following morning the towel was folded differently, and the loaf was half gone. And once there were 2 mugs in the drying rack when I'd only used one, which meant that somewhere in the dark, while I was at the bakery, she was coming out to eat the bread I'd left, and wash a cup, and slip back to her room before I got home. Keeping the ritual alive in secret, like neither of us was willing to be the one who let it die. People who are repulsed by you do not eat the bread you leave them at 5 in the morning. Her best friend Priya called me. Priya, who had never once called me, under the transparent pretext of needing a sourdough starter. 3 minutes into a conversation about flour, she said, far too casually, she's not seeing Devon anymore, by the way. And then, when I didn't take the bait, added, she's not seeing anyone. She told me she's, and I'm quoting, figuring something out, which is the most words Ren has ever spent saying nothing. So, she let that hang there and pivoted back to hydration percentages, and I stood in my kitchen understanding that I'd just been handed a map by a woman who'd clearly decided I was too dense to read one unassisted. I am a man who can tell, by the sound a loaf makes when you knock its underside, whether the inside is done. I could not, apparently, tell whether the woman I'd lived with for 3 years had stopped talking because she hated me, or because I'd finally said the one thing she'd been waiting 3 years to hear. My instincts work beautifully on everything that isn't my own life. And then there were the almost moments. Twice that week she started a sentence, Owen, about the other, and twice the kettle screamed or her phone buzzed or one of us flinched, and the sentence folded itself back up and went away. The apartment was full of half-said things. We'd built an entire home on never running out of words, and now we were drowning in the ones we couldn't get out. It broke on a Sunday night, back where it started, the kitchen floor, 1 in the morning, neither of us sleeping. I'd given up on bed and come out for water and found her already there, sitting against the cabinets in the dark with a blue towel in her lap, folding and unfolding it. She didn't tell me to leave. I sat down in my usual spot, the 6 inches of floor between us, and for a while we just stayed there in the hum of the fridge and the buzz of the bulb we still hadn't fixed. 2 people who used to fill every silence sitting inside one we'd built on purpose. She had the towel pressed between her hands. The window over the sink was going gray-blue at the edges, the way it does just before my alarm, and I thought about how in an hour I'd normally be at the bakery with my hands in dough, and how I would give up every loaf I had ever made to know what she was about to do with that towel. She turned it over once more. I heard her breathing change, the way a person's does right before they decide to be brave. "I've been eating the bread," she said finally, to the towel. A long breath, even when I wasn't talking to you. I couldn't make myself stop. 3 years of you leaving it on that counter, and the 1 week I should have been angry at you. Her voice caught. I realized I don't want to live anywhere I don't come home to your stupid, ugly bread. And that scared me so badly I went quiet. Because I am a person who never shuts up, Owen. And you sat right there and said someone who'd move out if she knew. And I sat here doing the math going, he means me, he has to mean me. And I couldn't get a single word out. Because for once in my life, the thing I wanted to say was too big for my mouth. Everything in me went still. The good kind. The kind the kitchen goes in that last quiet hour before the ovens come on, when the dough has done its slow work in the dark, and there's nothing left to do but trust that it rose. 3 years of waiting, of telling myself waiting was the same as patience. And here she was on the floor with the blue towel in her hands, telling me she'd been doing the very same math from the other side of a wall I'd built and called a kindness. I made myself slow down, because the most important thing was that she got to choose this freely. "Ren," she finally looked up. "You don't have to do this. We can call it a weird week and a thing I said at 1 in the morning. And tomorrow I'll bring home the bread and you'll narrate a movie and we go back to being the best thing either of us has. If this is going to cost us that, don't. I'd rather have 3 more years of you on this floor than gamble it on 1 sentence. The door's right there, and I won't be hurt. and I won't make it strange. You just have to tell me." I gave her the door. With Ren, it mattered more than I can say that the person who never stopped talking get to choose her words this time, with nobody rushing her. She didn't take it. She reached across the 6 inches of floor and took the front of my shirt in her fist, not gently, the way she did everything, with her whole self, and she said, "I don't want the door, you absolute disaster. I want the version where you stop leaving the bread and just be here when I wake up. I've wanted it so long I made myself sick going quiet over it. Don't you dare offer me a door." So I told her the true thing, and I didn't say "I love you," because she deserved better than the sentence everyone uses, and I'd had 3 years of pre-dawn quiet to decide what I'd actually say if I ever got the chance. "You're the only place I've ever been impatient to get home to," I said. "I spend every morning alone in the dark, waiting on bread, and the whole time I'm really just waiting for noon, when I get to leave a loaf on that counter and know you're behind the door. I bake for a living, and the best thing I make every single day is the excuse to see you. I didn't keep quiet for 3 years because I didn't feel it, Ren. I kept quiet because you were the one thing I couldn't stand to lose, and I'd rather have had you as a roommate forever than risk having you not at all." I closed my hand over hers where it was still fisted in my shirt. "But you asked me, on this exact floor, if I liked anyone. So yeah, it was always you. It was you the whole time." She made a sound that was half a laugh and half 3 years of held breath, and she pulled me in by the shirt, and we kissed on the kitchen floor with the blue towel crushed between us and the window going gold now, properly dawn. The hour I should have been pulling the first loaves out of the oven. And then, with the comic timing of a universe that had clearly been waiting on us too, my alarm went off down the hall, the bakery alarm. The one that meant a whole city was about to want bread, blaring its idiotic little melody into the most important moment of my life. We broke apart laughing, foreheads together, both of us gone helpless with it. "You have to go make the bread," she said, wiping her eyes, grinning at me. People need their bread, Owen. It was the least romantic sentence available to her, and it was the best one I'd ever heard, because it was hers, and because for the first time in 3 years she was saying it to me from the right side of the door. I was 40 minutes late to the bakery that morning, the only time in 9 years, and I have never once regretted a batch more cheerfully ruined. 3 months later, we stopped pretending the apartment had 2 halves. We were careful with it at first, 2 people who'd been so good at being friends that we had to learn the other things slowly, like a recipe neither of us had made before. She still narrated every movie. She still got offended on behalf of fictional underdogs. I still got up at 4 and left in the dark. But now there was a loaf on the counter every day in the open. No secret towel folding required, and a person who came out to steal the warm heel of it and kiss me with flour on her mouth. A year after that, I changed one thing about the ritual. I started tucking a note into the blue towel beside the loaf. Nothing grand. "Good one today," or "Oven ran hot, sorry," or most mornings, just her name. She kept every single one in a drawer, which I only discovered by accident, and which undid me completely, because I am, it turns out, a man who can say anything at all to a slab of dough at 5 a.m. And almost nothing out loud. And the hall-light thing came back, the way the small rituals do once a home decides it's safe again. Every night, last one up, one of us still says it. Night, weirdo. Except now it's said across a shared room instead of through a wall, which is the entire difference between the life I had and the life I'd been too scared to ask for. 3 years I'd listened to her say it from the far side of the apartment and called that enough. It was never enough. It was just close enough to bear. Years later, when people ask how we got together, she tells them I confessed my love on a dirty kitchen floor and then left for work, which is humiliatingly accurate. I tell them she asked me a question and then refused to speak for a week, which is also true. But the version I keep is the silence. The long, loud, unbearable quiet after my answer. The week the most talkative person I'd ever known couldn't find a single word because the words were too big. Because it was real. The quiet was never the rejection. The quiet was the whole thing rising. It wasn't sudden. It had probably always been her. 3 years of ugly loaves and 1 a.m. Floors and a home I'd been too scared to admit was already a home. It just, one Tuesday night, asked me a question I finally answered. So tell me, what would you have done if your roommate asked whether you liked anyone, and your honest answer made them go completely quiet? Would you have laughed it off the next morning, the way I tried to? Or would you have sat in the silence and waited to find out what it was made of? And have you ever loved someone so quietly for so long that saying it out loud felt like it might cost you the only home you had? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every one. If this one found you somewhere early and quiet, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.